Nintendo's NES Classic Edition was a neat idea that sold out the butt and didn't come anywhere close to meeting demand. But rather than producing more consoles, Nintendo decided to leave money on the table in their typical-ass backwards fashion by discontinuing the NES Mini despite it selling out within minutes every time it was restocked, and selling over 2 million systems worldwide. Instead, Nintendo's moving on to the next eBay scalping craze by releasing the SNES Classic Edition, which is pretty much the same thing but with the Super Nintendo instead. But after the SNES Mini sells out, will Nintendo keep the trend going next year with the 64? And if so, what games should be included? Let's discuss! I know the SNES Classic isn't even out yet, but what can I say? I like to think big and in the future. The main thing I've been wondering for about the past week or so is if Nintendo should even bother making a Mini 64. Sure, it'd be cool and everyone would buy it, but how practical would it be for them to produce it? I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but the controllers are a little more complicated than the previous two consoles. I mean, have you ever taken a 64 controller apart? There's a lot of shit going on in there. Not to mention that the controller's bigger and not particularly miniature friendly. I mean, the original 64 controller's bigger than both Classic Edition consoles. Also, what about the rumble feature? It's not that big of a deal, but it'll feel weird playing Ocarina of Time with the Stone of Agony being useless. A Micro 64 wouldn't come out till at least 2018, and the 64 technology is very primitive at this point, so I'm not saying it's not possible to make. I'm just saying there'd be a little more effort involved in. I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up costing $100 if they do end up making it. I mean, surely they will make it at some point, right? But what about the games? A double-edged sword for Nintendo regarding this matter would be that there weren't too many notable third-party games. The upside of that would be fewer royalties N-Dog would have to split, with the downside being fewer classics to choose from. As far as games that should actually be on the console, obvious choices would be Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Star Fox, Mario Kart, Pokemon Snap, Paper Mario, F-Zero, Yoshi's Story, Mario Golf, Mario Tennis, Kirby and the Crystal Shards, and Super Smash Bros. Not a bad little list of 13 games that I came up with off the top of my head that don't really need an explanation as to why they're on here, other than they're great games that represent the best of what the original console had to offer. But we'd need at least 20 games to make it not seem like a complete ripoff when it's inevitably going to be compared to the previous two consoles. So what else would make the cut? I know Mario Party games are obvious, but they're all more or less the same thing, so we really don't need all three. Personally, I'd put 2 or 3 on there over the first one, since they're more refined and generally require less button mashing and stick spinning tomfoolery. I'd say Pokemon Stadium should be included, but a big part of that game was being able to transfer your Pokemon over from the first generation on the Game Boy. So unless you can do that with the red, blue, and yellow versions on the 3DS and maybe Switch in the future, I just don't see Pokemon Stadium being a practical choice. That pretty much sums up all the games made by Nintendo that could be included on here, so now we're gonna have to reach out to some third parties to fill it up to 20. 2 games that'd be considered obvious are Donkey Kong 64 and Diddy Kong Racing. I know Microsoft owns Rare now, but it's not exactly like they could re-release these games on the Xbox One. Plus, we got Donkey Kong Country on the tiny SNES, so I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem since these games are pretty critical if you're making a tiny 64. But what else is pretty critical are the other games made by Rare that I'd hope Nintendo would just bite the bullet and try to get on the console. A Nintendo 64 compilation without Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, or Conker's Bad Fur Day is pretty lame. Realistically, we'd be lucky to even get Banjo 1 with only one of the 3 Donkey Kong Country games making it onto the SNES Mini. And as great as Conker's Bad Fur Day is, it's pretty vulgar. As much as I'd love to see it on there, and would put the game on there if it was all up to me, I don't think Nintendo would want to pay Microsoft to include a game as gratuitous as this. I doubt Microsoft would mind getting free royalties from the 64 Mini without even having to do anything. After all, if they got people talking about these old franchises that they own the rights to, then I wouldn't be surprised if they saw the money in making a new Banjo or Conker for the Xbox One. So I can understand why Nintendo wouldn't be thrilled to put these games on here, but god damn it, just give us the first Banjo-Kazooie. It's the 64, fuck, crying out loud. I know we can't get GoldenEye since not only is it made by Rare, but it's also an expensive movie license. Plus, it doesn't exactly hold up very well in a world where everyone plays Call of Duty. If we didn't even get Turtles in Time, I wouldn't expect to see this. Perfect Dark doesn't have the expensive movie license to deal with, but since Microsoft owns it, I don't expect it. As much as I hate to admit this, I'd bet money that Nintendo would probably want to keep the 64 Mini at a teen rating since, well, they're Nintendo. So I'd be surprised if Resident Evil 2 made it in, even though it totally should. I know it's associated as more of a PlayStation game, but the 64 version had better graphics, and it would really add some more variety to the lineup. I don't know, maybe if it only had the green blood, it could squeak by with the teen rating. If not, you could put Bomberman 64 in its place for the sake of variety. With Resident Evil 2 being a wild card, we can consider this a 21st bonus game. And as important as it is to have variety, I can't not put Snowboard Kids 2 on here, even though it'd be the 4th racing game. I doubt this will make the cut since nobody really gives a shit about this game, but it really needs to. It's highly underrated, plus wacky and charming enough to fit right in. in. If you haven't played it before, go check it out. The final game I'd have on here, though, is the Japanese exclusive Sin and Punishment. This was already released as a digital download for the Wii, completely translated in English. If Resident Evil 2 makes the cut, this could be the 21st bonus game, and if Resident Evil 2 is too gory, then this could just be the 20th game. And if you advertised it as an unreleased game, then it could make the overall package more intriguing like Star Fox 2 does for the Micro SNES. What games would you want on the Mini 64, though? I know I left a few good games off a year, so let me know how much of a butt-ass I am in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't yet. My mom named me Cameron, and I'll see you next time.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.